When I woke up this morning, I was feeling pretty dangerous.
Welcome back to Draftvice. My name is Walter. Today, we're talking about Deshaun Watson. He is not going to be criminally charged with, as far as the situation regarding the 20 women who filed civil lawsuits against him for various different kinds of misconduct or alleged misconduct that took place over the last couple of years regarding massage therapists. The DA in Houston impaneled a grand jury, presented evidence, and they came back no bill. What does all this mean? Well, luckily I happen to be an attorney, although not an attorney in Texas. I'm an attorney in New Jersey and in New York, weird enough. And what is a grand jury? Well, in America, in a lot of states, there is a process for criminally charging somebody. You impanel what's called a grand jury. You might have watched TV and heard of a jury. A grand jury is on the opposite end of the process. The jury is at the end. The grand jury, weirdly enough, is at the beginning of the process. And in some states, in a lot of states, in order to criminally charge somebody with certain crimes, you need to go to a grand jury and get them to allow you to indict them. In Texas, you have to, they have to recommend a bill. In Texas, it is 12 grand jurors, and at least 9 of them have to vote for the indictment. New Jersey has grand juries. New York has grand juries. A lot of states also have processes that allow you to usurp a grand jury, go around it. Some states don't have grand juries at all. But in this case, so what does a grand jury do? A grand jury determines if there is enough probable cause to move forward with a case, right? To allow for a felony indictment. Now, technically, Deshaun Watson could still be charged with a misdemeanor, although right now what I'm seeing announced is that he will not be charged. So it means that the prosecutor's office will not move forward with a case with as far as criminally charging with him, at least in that jurisdiction. Now, there are some things to note. In Deshaun Watson's case, there were 20 plaintiffs civilly who filed. There were 10 who filed criminal complaints. At least one was not in the jurisdiction of where this investigation took place, so she fell outside the lines. It doesn't mean that he couldn't be charged in that jurisdiction if that person decided to file a criminal complaint in that jurisdiction. There's also at least 1 or 2 that fell outside the statute of limitations. Statute of limitations is a time frame for which you can bring a case. A lot of people in America are very familiar with this. So at least 1 or 2 of the matters fell outside the statute of limitations. And so there was only about, I believe, 8 witnesses that were brought before the grand jury that were of the 20 alleged cases. What does this mean? It means that the prosecutor presented this evidence and they came back no bill. But there's an old saying in America, a prosecutor can get a grand jury to indict a ham sandwich if they wanted to. What does that mean? It means that it's a relatively low bar, and B, the process is very skewed towards the prosecution. For instance, the defendant's not there for any of these cases for a grand jury usually. Sometimes they might ask him to appear, and sometimes they won't. But generally speaking, a defendant is not in the room unless they are brought in for testimony. But they also have a Fifth Amendment right to not to they have a Fifth Amendment right not to incriminate themselves. So most of the time they won't, and most of the time they don't get to that point because typically their testimony, if they are even going to testify, would come at trial, because it's the old saying, anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. Well, don't say shit until you're ready. And generally speaking, a lot of times people don't even testify in their own criminal cases. It's not all the time. Sometimes you do it, and sometimes you don't. So what's going on here? Well, okay, it doesn't mean that Deshaun Watson is innocent. I just want to clarify this. He's not even found not guilty. It's just that they do not, to some degree, believe that there is enough evidence to move forward with the case. There are things that might have affected this. Like I said, a lot of the allegations that came out was a range of allegations. It wasn't like one thing. It was, one of them, it was they saw his penis. This one might have touched the penis. This one might have did this. And it was, so these allegations are, some of them were, again, not all of them were presented. So we don't know which ones were actually presented to the grand jury. It was over the course of several years. So a lot of the questions that are going to come up are going to be, well, why'd you wait so long, right? And I think that that's definitely something that gets brought up in a lot of sexual assault cases. Why did you wait so long? And a lot of times why is because you question yourself. I've handled some cases similar to this, and filing those complaints are hard. And especially if you have been sexually assaulted, it's a very rough thing to do. I know there were, Deshaun Watson tried getting to sign NDAs before this point, long ago. That was actually part of like the initial allegations. So, but fast forward to this. So we know that there were 8 witnesses that were supposedly called for the grand jury. We know that there's been 9 months of an investigation. Remember, the DA started this investigation back in last summer. Now we're all the way into March. What went on here? Does that mean that that he's innocent? No. Could mean that the most egregious of the stories that we heard of might have fell outside the jurisdiction, might have not had a criminal complaint filed. Maybe the people who had the most egregious complaints didn't want to be involved with it, didn't want to criminally prosecute him. So now we're at this stage, we just don't know. And because grand juries are impaneled, they're also impaneled confidentially, so you won't know all the facts that get presented to a grand jury, because again, it's a relatively low bar. The only thing a grand jury is really deciding is whether you can charge somebody. It's not deciding that you are guilty or not guilty. Just like Deshaun Watson would not have been guilty if the grand jury decided to let them move forward. Now, like I said before, you might be hearing this and going like, well, wait a second. If a grand jury would indict a ham sandwich, if the prosecutor wanted them to, what does that mean if they didn't indict the ham sandwich, or in this case, Deshaun Watson? Does that mean that the ham sandwich has a very good case? Could be. It could also mean that the prosecutor kind of pushed them that direction. Like again, usually when you hear of grand juries returning a no bill, not all the time, but a lot of the times because the prosecutor doesn't want to move forward with the case. And if they're not moving forward with the case and they don't want to press charges, it's a lot, especially a high-profile case like this, you might want to go ahead and let the grand jury be the villain, right? Because it's a bunch of faceless people. A lot of times district attorneys and prosecutors, some places they're publicly elected, some places they're not, they're appointed, but there's usually somebody in a policy-making position who gets to decide your fate if you aren't elected. So, you might want to go ahead and instead of taking the flack, blame it on the grand jury and have something to kind of blame another person, another group of people who their face isn't on the social media, they're not on the court website. So is it possible that the grand jury was led a certain direction? Because remember, it's the prosecutor who is directing this whole thing, right? The prosecutor, there's no, the defense attorney's not there for it. The prosecutor presents their evidence. And again, most of the time, if the prosecutor wants to go forward with it, they go forward with it. Because a lot of the times that's just kind of how, because the prosecutor's in such a position, they're in the position of power. They're the ones there that are, presenting the evidence. So it doesn't mean that, that necessarily one person's innocent or guilty. It means that maybe the prosecutor felt like, you know what, probably is enough probable cause, but if I lean a certain way, I don't have to, if I present it this way, we might come back with no bill, and I don't have to worry about having to go through a case where we're drudging. Maybe the prosecutor had her doubts. Maybe she went through this and said, okay, I have my doubts on this case. B, there might have been some more serious things that happened, but they were not these 8 witnesses. C, it's a lot of time and energy and money that would be presented, be involved in this. And also, the prosecutor might be like, well, maybe, if this gets resolved another way, then it might be the best way that this gets resolved for these women anyway, maybe like a financial settlement. So what does this all mean going forward? First off, Deshaun Watson can be charged again at some point later on, even in another jurisdiction. Again, if there was another jurisdiction, like I said before, one of the plaintiffs, one of the women who were one of the complaining witnesses, was in another jurisdiction. So, but we have not heard anything brought as far as bringing charges in that jurisdiction. There's also potential federal federal crimes that could be brought against Deshaun Watson. You can impanel a grand jury multiple times. There is no double jeopardy for a grand jury indictment. It's just an indictment. And again, if new facts come to light within the statute of limitations, the DA can impanel a new grand jury and go ahead and go forward and keep trying to. But I think what this tells me is that the DA either did not want to go forward with it or did not think there was enough to go forward with it as far as winning the case and going through all this and what it would do to, what happens if the witnesses drop out and you're trying to prosecute this case, or what happens if they come back. Again, like the prosecutor doesn't want to get, painted as, oh, this person didn't do her job. So I'm not saying Deshaun Watson did or didn't do anything. I'm not saying he is innocent or guilty. Clearly something weird happened in these 20 cases, because there wouldn't be 20-something women coming forward with all different stories. Maybe not all of the things he did were criminal misconduct. For some reason, Rusty Hardin even said that he felt like this should have been resolved in civil court, not criminal court. And I think that's actually something I want to point out, is Rusty Hardin seemed very sure this was getting resolved on March 11th for some reason. They had a deposition for March 11th, which is the day I'm recording this, which is the day the grand jury came back no bill. Apparently the day where we're finding out that Deshaun Watson's not being criminally charged, and I'm assuming the grand jury came back no bill. If that's the case, I'm thinking Rusty Hardin had a very good hint at that, or some kind of inkling as far as which witnesses were going to be the ones that were testifying, which witnesses were the ones that, which cases are going to be the hardest ones to defend, and what information that he might have been aware of that the DA might, again, because the DA did reach out to their side as well to get their side of the story, to get some information. They subpoenaed electronic records. There was a lot of work that was done on this. I'm not saying the DA didn't do her job. But again, like, it might have been the DA felt like, okay, like, yeah, maybe the bar is probable cause for a minimum, but maybe I want to push them towards maybe it not being probable cause, because this is going to be an intense case. It's going to be a very public case. It's going to be, for a guy who, again, is, right now in the public ethos. So there's a lot of things that could have went on here. It does not mean Deshaun Watson is innocent. Josina Anderson, very famous reporter covering the NFL, tweeted out, Texas justice source to me just now who gave me some indication this morning, foreshadowing today's decision by the grand jury regarding Deshaun Watson's criminal case. Whatever money he paid Rusty Hardin was well worth it. Rusty Hardin's a great attorney, like reputable as the day is long, very well known. And again, has he made missteps in this case? Every attorney will sometimes have some small missteps, especially when it comes to PR aspects of a case. It's usually not a thing you're taught in law school. And, Busby has had his own issues as well. But both these attorneys are very well-known attorneys in Texas. It definitely sounds like Rusty Hardin's been doing his work. And again, he's well known in Texas, well known to the prosecutor's office. And he clearly was foreshadowing this before, because they were expected to have a deposition on the same day, and he asked for it just to be adjourned to Monday. And if Rusty Hardin had the inkling that this was going to go on longer, he wouldn't just be asking for an adjournment until Monday, because a grand jury being impaneled can take weeks. It could take weeks for you to get some kind of response back from the grand jury. The fact that they are not moving forward criminal charges within a few hours means that whatever case the DA presented, in whatever way they presented it, it came back no bill relatively quickly. Like I said, there is no double jeopardy. He could be charged again, especially if new facts come out. But as of right now, Deshaun Watson is not being charged. He could still be suspended in the NFL. Because we saw that with the Zeke Elliott case. But now that the criminal matter has been resolved, he still has 20-something cases, or 20 cases. I think 2 of them might have dropped out at some point as well. But he still has 20 cases of civil cases regarding this various different allegations of sexual misconduct. Where does this leave everything? Well, it probably means he's getting traded. That's not a shock. Beyond that, I think it means that, first off, we have to be very careful how we talk about this stuff. People always want to say, oh, they're just because they came out later. But again, like, innocent until proven guilty as well. So I think it's kind of weird to kind of play both sides of that. It is innocent until proven guilty. It's also with sexual assault victims and victims of crimes like this, or complaining witnesses, there's reasons why people don't come forward really right away, why they go a civil route instead of a criminal route. For instance, a lot, and that was very much made a big deal early on in this case, was that, they went the civil route, not the criminal route. But you even heard it from Deshaun Watson's attorney, this should be civilly handled, not criminally handled. For one, you might not have thought that the person that you were, for instance, somebody does something like this that might legally be, indecent assault, indecent exposure, sexual assault, but you might not want to criminally punish them. You might not want people to go to jail for years on end. You might not want to be put under the scope. Again, you have way more control over a civil case than a criminal case, right? It's your attorney being your advocate. It's not the prosecutor's office being your advocate. And then going through all this, rigmarole of, getting subpoenas and doing, going through this process. This also opens up Deshaun Watson, at least as of right now. Now, they could still, I guess, technically plead the fifth if they still believe there are criminal charges coming from some other direction. But it sounds like Rusty Hardin hinted that if it did come back no bill, he wouldn't push him not to plead the fifth because there were no criminal charges. Now, we had that in the Bill Cosby case, where Bill Cosby actually, part of the reason why Bill Cosby, quote unquote, went free was because they actually said it was double jeopardy. He had agreed with the prosecutor's office basically, he got a form of immunity by, hey, the prosecutor's office in Pennsylvania said, if you go ahead and go to the deposition, we won't prosecute you for this case. And they held that to that prosecutor's office because, again, those statements were actually used against Bill Cosby. Totally different case. But again, and it's a totally different state, and that was decided under state law. I'm not quite sure how Texas determines all that as far as that kind of a situation would go if, say, these statements that he says in these civil depositions, if they end up happening, because he might just resolve them after this because it will help him get traded to the team he wants to go get traded to. With that being said, though, like I said before, there's reasons why people file civil cases. You have things like depositions. You might feel like criminally charging somebody is a little too much. You can give them interrogatories where they have to, they're answering under oath. And you might say, like, listen, I get to have control over my own case. It's my advocate. I could decide to settle this tomorrow. I could decide to end this. And I can decide to keep going further and want more money or whatever else it is that I want out of it, an apology, whether I want to sign an NDA or not. And you might feel like financial retribution is enough. You might feel like, hey, listen, like, what you did was wrong. I don't like it, but I don't want you going to jail. I don't want you, ruining your career. I feel like $100,000 is enough. And that's kind of like, remember, early on, all I was asked was a financial settlement. There wasn't a criminal charge initially. Honestly, they should have resolved it like that back then, a year and a half, 2 years ago at this point, but we're well past that. At the end of the day, Deshaun Watson's innocent until proven guilty, but, like, that's in the court of law. You could still look at the facts surrounding this and go, okay, something weird happened. I don't like that he did a lot of these weird things. Clearly, there's something that went on and feel weirded out about it. Innocent until proven guilty is under the guise of the government and, criminally charged. And again, he could still be suspended by the NFL. That's not to say, like, I'm going to walk around being, well, Deshaun Watson. Because, again, like, there's other cases like that kind of, where the guy where the person who should be criminally charged doesn't get criminally charged, or where somebody, where they are found not guilty. And you still think that, again, what you think personally, how you feel personally about this case is not the same thing as how it's handled legally, how it's seen in a court of law. That being said, it looks like he's going to get traded soon. We'll find out relatively quickly, I'm sure. We will probably see a resolution to some of this. I know Deshaun Watson's already tweeting something about the truth. I'll even pull it up for you guys. Where is it? Anyway, it probably means he plays this year. Even if he does get suspended, he's not going to be on the commissioner's exempt list, which I think was the real big worry for a lot of teams, because that puts you on the we don't know when this gets resolved track, especially if he's criminally charged and if this goes on much longer. End of the day, it is what it is. And if you want, you can follow the podcast at Draftvice on Twitter, at Draftvice_football on Instagram. You can follow me at BROJO. Death is in the end of life. Punch, like a delicious drink you drink in the summer. And that's it.
When I woke up this morning, I was feeling pretty dangerous.
About the past and about the future.